Chapter 2, Feeding Out. Nadine, you want to help me and Daniel feed out? Her brother hovered in the doorway. Where's Ted? Nadine asked sleepily. Already out, don't worry, he added, as if he read her mind. He's in a good mood this morning. Okay, give me 5 minutes. Martin disappeared and she hauled herself out of the great weight of blankets and, because her socks had come off in the night, walked briskly on the cold floor to the toilet. When Nadine had finished and tried to flush, nothing happened. Well, that's not entirely true. The water level came up and stayed up. Damn, she muttered to herself. The toilet had blocked again. The toilet gone bung again, love, Marion called from the kitchen. Yeah, just leave it. Put the seat down and I'll have a look at it later. Just another example of how living in the country sucked. Not enough hot water, mud, the damp, a stupid toilet that never did as it was supposed to. And that was just the winter. In the summer it was worse. Flies, ticks, fleas, ants, spiders, anything and everything that crawled seemed to make its way into Nadine's bedroom and her bed. I hate this place, she muttered as she stomped out of the bathroom. The sun had not yet pulled its head over the eastern hills when Nadine put on her gumboots and walked over to the tractor that Ted had already backed out of the shed. The dogs had been let off and were wildly chasing each other in and around the slow-moving vehicle, yapping noisily. She grabbed the side of the tray and scrambled aboard. Daniel and Martin were already on, balancing. The tractor picked up speed as they headed toward the hay barn in the corner paddock. Flecks of mud were flung off the large tyres and whizzed past them, sometimes landing on one of the dogs. Already her gloves were damp from the cool air, and she was beginning to doubt her decision to join them when the sun sprang up over the ridge in a blaze of pink and orange. Don't get sunrises like that in the city, shouted Ted over his shoulder. Sure don't, they agreed, looking at each other. Not one of them would have dared to contradict him. He had brought them out here 18 months ago, said the country was the only place to bring up children. Daniel didn't mind it so much, but Nadine and Martin missed the city and their friends. Marion just did what Ted said. The cattle in the flat paddock and the sheep in number 5 had begun to gather at their gates. They'd heard the tractor and knew what was coming. Daniel and Nadine chucked bales to Martin, who stacked them swiftly and skillfully onto the tray. Daniel was doing about 2 to Nadine's 1. One day, Daniel Bamford, she panted, I'm going to be as fast as you. No way, you're only a girl. He wasn't meaning to put her down. To Daniel, it was just how things were. However, one of Nadine's goals was to prove him how wrong he was. 18 bales stacked high meant they walked alongside the tractor with the dogs. They did the sheep first, cutting the strings with the small sharp knives and splitting the bales into 4 and tossing them over the fence. Next they pushed their way through the cattle and spread out the feed along the bottom of the hill. In no time the bleating and bellowing was silenced, and only a huffing and panting could be heard from the animals. Steam rose softly as they ate. The 3 of them then gathered up the cut string, knotting it onto the rail of the tray as they had been taught. Ted used this twine for anything from tying up his pants to holding down a runaway calf. Waste not, want not, he often said, and they did not argue with him. The sun had begun to warm them, and Nadine's stomach told her it was time for breakfast. One more load, and then time for breakfast, Ted announced as he started up the tractor. Daniel and Martin and Nadine climbed back on the tray for the ride back to the barn, and the whole process was repeated, this time feeding out to the river paddock close to home. They could smell the bacon as they approached the house and took off their gumboots. They stripped off their outer gear and washed their hands in the warm water Marion had thoughtfully put in the wash-house tub, a sign there was no hot water again. Just like the sheep and the cattle, the Bamford family and Ted ate their breakfast hungrily, no one speaking or looking at anything but their food. When he had finished, Ted looked up and spoke to Miriam. "Got to go see Brian." Martin and Daniel stopped chewing and stared at their plates. "I'll be back late," Ted continued. "Do you need help?" Marion asked, buttering toast. The boys held their breath as if willing a certain answer. "I'll take Daniel." Daniel slumped and Martin's face coloured. "I'll go if you like, Uncle Ted." Nadine looked up. Martin twitched and dropped his knife. "Watch what you're doing, you clumsy idiot," Ted roared, Nadine's offer forgotten in the noise. "Sorry," Martin murmured, looking at Daniel again. "Daniel, finish up. I want to check the ewes in the shed before we go." "Yes, sir." Silently, Daniel stuffed the remains of his breakfast into his mouth. Then he got up from the table, took his plate to the sink, rinsed it and stacked it with a small pile of dirty dishes. "Martin, make sure the dogs get another good run, and Nadine, don't feed them late this time." "Yes, Uncle Ted," they replied in unison, with Nadine aware something awful had just happened between her brothers and this man who had such control over their lives.